What if everything you call reality is actually the result of a mistake? Think about it for a second. Not a small, unnoticed error, but a profound, structural one. Something that happened at some point in time more outside of ITAN, simply broke the rules of the universe as we know it. What if, since then, everything that exists is just an attempt to fix this bug, without ever managing to do it perfectly? Now tell me, have you ever had the feeling that something isn't right, as if the world has frozen for a moment? A strange déjà vu, a memory that doesn't quite fit, or even that moment when everything seems to repeat itself. As if you've lived through exactly that before. Have you ever experienced that? These small glitches might seem like mere coincidence, or something you're imagining. But what if they're not? What if these moments are actually tiny glitches of reality? Almost invisible cracks in a system trying to remain stable. Imagine that reality functions like a perfectly synchronized 2D animation. Every frame in its right place, every movement calculated. Now imagine that, at some point, a single frame is corrupted. A minor error, but enough to alter the entire sequence. What happens next? The system tries to correct it. It adjusts here, rearranges there, but it never returns to being exactly as it was before. And that's where things get really interesting. Because when we start looking at concepts like time paradoxes, everything ceases to be as linear as it seems. The idea of past, present, and future begins to blur. Events that should be impossible start to make sense within a broken system. A small error in the flow of time could generate gigantic consequences, creating alternative realities, fragmented timelines, or even different versions of the same moment. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because perhaps time isn't just passing. Perhaps it's constantly trying to reorganize itself. What if this error wasn't a one-off thing? What if it's still happening, like a recurring bug that the system can't completely fix? This would explain why certain things seem out of place. Small details that don't make sense, strange feelings, coincidences that seem too good or too strange to be just chance. Stay with me until the end, because this is going to start making even more sense. The idea of reality glitches isn't new, but when you connect it with paradoxes and the possibility of broken time, everything takes on a different weight. We're not just talking about crazy theories. We're talking about patterns, about sensations shared by thousands of people, and about a question that keeps coming back. What if reality isn't as stable as it seems? Perhaps the most disturbing thing isn't the existence of an error, but the fact that we might be living within it without realizing it. Like characters in an animation who never saw the corrupted frame, they only sense that something is slightly wrong, and the more you think about it, the harder it becomes to ignore certain details. That feeling of repetition, that impression that time skips something, or even moments when everything seems too real, as if trying to compensate for some invisible flaw. But then comes the question that changes everything. What if this mistake not only altered reality, but created it? What if this mistake not only altered reality, but created it? Because when you start looking at it from that angle, everything changes. It's no longer about an isolated failure. It's about the possibility that all of existence is a consequence of that initial deviation. As if, at some impossible to locate point, something went out of control and everything that came after was just an adaptation, a continuous reorganization trying to keep things running. And perhaps that's why certain experiences seem so difficult to explain. That strange feeling of reliving something that has already happened. The impression that time has sped up or slowed down for no reason, or even moments when reality seems unstable, as if it were rendering around you. It's not just imagination, at least, not entirely. Now I want to ask you something real. Does this make sense to you? Because if at any point in your life you felt that something was out of place, that something didn't quite fit into reality, perhaps you've already noticed one of these small signs. And if that's the case, I really want to know. If this topic resonated with you in any way, leave a comment below, describing what affected you the most. It could be a strange experience, a déjà vu you've never forgotten, or even a feeling that's hard to explain. Sometimes, what seems isolated takes on a completely different meaning when we share it. And it's not just about commenting. When you like this type of video, you show that this type of content needs to continue to exist. It seems simple, but it literally pushes the idea to more people, allows more people to access these reflections, and helps build a community that questions, observes, and doesn't accept everything as obvious. And if you want to continue exploring this kind of mystery, these ideas about paradoxes, broken time, and reality glitches, subscribing to the channel is what keeps this journey alive. Because, in the end, this space isn't just about videos, it's about connecting people who have already felt that something different is happening. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And the more people start paying attention to these details, the harder it becomes to ignore what might be hidden right in front of us. Because perhaps what we call reality isn't something fixed. Perhaps it's something that, at this very moment, is trying to remain stable, even while carrying an error that was never truly corrected. Guide. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when we begin to see reality as a constantly adjusting system, everything takes on a new layer of meaning. It's not just about glitches or isolated failures. It's about a silent transformation happening all the time, as if there were invisible backstage movements reorganizing every detail of your experience. Think about the decisions you make every day. How many of them truly feel like your own, and how many seem to happen almost automatically? There's a very fine line between choice and correction. If reality arose from a mistake, then every decision might actually be an attempt by that system to balance itself, to find a more stable version of itself. This completely changes how we perceive our own journey, and that's where something even more intriguing comes in, the possibility of a hidden truth behind what we perceive. Not a distant or inaccessible truth, but something that manifests itself in small signs patterns that repeat themselves. Coincidences that seem laden with purpose, moments that cause an impact that is difficult to ignore, as if, behind the surface, there were a logic trying to emerge, even if imperfectly. Perhaps you've already felt this without realizing it, that feeling that something important was about to happen, or that you were exactly where you should be, even without understanding why. This may not just be intuition, it could be part of a larger mechanism, adjusting paths, recalculating possibilities, reacting to an error that never ceased to exist. And the more you observe, the more you realize that reality isn't as rigid as it seems. It adapts, responds, changes shape as you interact with it, as if you weren't just a spectator, but also an active participant in this continuous process of reconstruction. This raises a powerful question. To what extent is what you experience truly fixed? And to what extent is it constantly being rewritten? Perhaps the answer lies in the details that most people ignore. And perhaps it is precisely in these details that the greatest revelations begin. Comment below. Does this make sense to me? Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because understanding what a glitch in reality actually is completely changes how you see everything around you. When we talk about error, the first image that comes to mind is something simple, correctable. But here we are not talking about something common. We are talking about a structural flaw, something that may have affected the basic rules that underpin time, space, and even your own perception. Imagine an extremely complex system where every detail depends on the other to function perfectly. Now imagine that, at some point in this mechanism, a small inconsistency arises. Not something big enough to collapse everything, but subtle enough to go unnoticed, while generating silent impacts throughout its entire existence. This is what we call a reality glitch. This type of error doesn't manifest itself in an obvious way. It appears behind the scenes, in the intervals, in the moments when logic seems to fail for a second. It's as if reality is constantly adjusting itself, trying to maintain a coherence that has already been broken. And this brings about a profound transformation in the way we interpret what is real. Because perhaps what you see is only the most stable possible version of something that, deep down, isn't so stable after all. And here's a point that almost no one considers. What if these errors aren't exceptions, but part of the very functioning of the universe? As if the universe operated in a state of continuous correction, recalculating decisions, reorganizing events, adjusting paths to prevent the original flaw from becoming too visible. This would give meaning to so many experiences that seem to have no explanation, as if there were a hidden truth trying to reveal itself in small fragments. Throughout this journey, your own mindset begins to change. You start to observe more, question more, and notice patterns where before there was only routine. Because, in the end, understanding these potential mistakes isn't just about the universe. It's about the impact it has on how you experience each moment. And the more you think about it, the more inevitable the question becomes. Could it be that what you consider solid has already been altered countless times without you realizing it? Comment below. I'm on this journey to hide. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when we enter into the paradoxes of time, logic simply begins to unravel before our eyes. It's not just confusing, it's almost as if reality itself is in conflict with itself. One of the most classic examples is simple, but disturbing. What if you went back in time and prevented something essential from happening? What would happen to everything that came after? Do you see how this completely breaks the idea of cause and effect? Because if you alter the past, the present changes. But if the present changes, then the reason that made you go back in time may never have existed. And then everything enters an impossible cycle to unsolve. This isn't just theory. This is a logical flaw within the structure of time. Now connect this to everything we've discussed so far. If there's a flaw in reality, the paradoxes might not just be hypothetical ideas, but signs that the system has already been corrupted at some level. As if time were trying to reorganize itself but without managing to maintain a completely coherent timeline. This would explain why certain things seem to contradict each other, as if multiple versions of the same story were happening behind the scenes. And here comes a revelation that completely changes the perspective. Perhaps time is not a line, but a set of possibilities being adjusted all the time. Every decision, every choice, every small deviation can generate a much greater impact than it seems. creating invisible ramifications that coexist, even if you only perceive one of them. This completely transforms how you view your own journey, because if time can bend, adjust, or even contradict itself, then your decisions aren't just isolated moments. They can be points of correction, attempts by the system itself to find a more stable version of reality. And perhaps that's why, sometimes, you feel that something could have been different, as if another version of that moment still existed somewhere. Comment below. My perception muddu. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when we talk about a broken timeline, we're not just talking about something that stopped working, but something that continues to operate, only imperfectly, as if the timeline had been fragmented into several pieces and, since then, has been continuously reconstructed behind the scenes, trying to maintain an appearance of normality. Imagine time not as a straight line, but as a pane of glass that has fallen and shattered. Each fragment still reflects a part of reality, but never in the same way again. And the most curious thing is that, even so, everything continues to function. You wake up, make decisions, continue your journey. But perhaps you are navigating an adjusted version, recalculated at every instant. This brings about a silent transformation in the way we perceive the world, because, if time is broken, then what you are experiencing now may not be a perfect continuation of what came before. It may be an adaptation, a correction, a subtle deviation that keeps the structure stable, even if the foundation has already been compromised. And this is where the real revelations begin. Small lapses, sensations of displacement, moments when your mind seems to try to reach something that is no longer there, as if alternative versions of that same instant existed, coexisting invisibly, while you experience only one of them. This would explain why certain memories seem distorted, or why some decisions carry a strange weight, as if other possibilities were still echoing. Perhaps the impact of this is greater than it seems. Because if time can fragment and reorganize itself, then your own trajectory is not as fixed as you imagine. It may be being adjusted with each choice, each thought, each micro-deviation that redefines the path. And amidst all of this, a disturbing question arises. Are you following a continuous timeline, or just jumping between versions that seem connected? Comment below. Time is not what it seems. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because all of this leads to a specific point, almost impossible to pinpoint, but essential to understanding this entire logic: the moment of error. Not a common instant, marked on a calendar or recorded in history, but a point outside of perception, where something deviated from what should have happened, and, from that point on, everything needed to be reorganized. Imagine this moment as a silent disruption in the backstage of existence. No sound, no warning. Just a minimal alteration that generated a chain reaction, like a decision that shouldn't have been made, or an event that happened differently than expected. And from that point on, the entire system entered a constant process of adaptation, trying to maintain coherence, even with the altered foundation. What's most intriguing is that this error didn't need to be significant. On the contrary, the more subtle it was, the harder it was to detect. And perhaps that's precisely why it had such a profound impact, because nobody noticed, nobody corrected it, and then reality continued, adjusting, recalculating, creating new versions of continuity to sustain what was no longer perfect. This completely changes how we perceive cause and effect, because if there was a point of deviation, then everything that came after can carry small distortions, small differences that accumulate over time, shaping decisions, altering paths, influencing entire journeys without us even realizing it. And here's an idea that might seem uncomfortable, but makes sense within this logic. What if you were also a consequence of this mistake? Not in a literal sense, but as part of this continuous adjustment, this attempt by reality to find balance. Every choice you make, every change of mindset, every moment of transformation can actually be a response to something that began long before you existed. This has a profound impact, because it ceases to be something distant and becomes something personal, as if, somehow, you were connected to this invisible point of origin, actively participating in something much bigger than it seems. And the more you think about it, the more inevitable the doubt becomes. Has this mistake already happened? Or is it still happening now? Comment below. It all started with Anne and Roe. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because, if this error really happened, or continues to happen, then it leaves traces. Not obvious evidence, like a visible flaw in the sky, or something impossible appearing in front of you, but subtle signs, almost imperceptible, that go unnoticed by most people. Have you ever had the feeling that time skipped a piece, as if a period simply disappeared and you couldn't explain what happened there? Or THAT, intense déjà vu, that feels more like a memory than a sensation. These moments aren't just curious, they carry a certain weight, like small cracks revealing something behind the scenes. And it doesn't stop there. Sometimes, it's the smallest details, a conversation you swore happened differently, an object out of place, a memory that doesn't match current reality. Simple things, but they have a strange impact on your perception. As if there were a previous version of it all, that for some reason was adjusted. This might seem like just a memory lapse. But what if it's more than that? What if these inconsistencies are attempts by the system to correct the error, rewriting parts of reality in real time, as if something were constantly editing your experience, smoothing out imperfections to keep everything running smoothly? This idea completely changes the mindset with which you view the world, because you stop seeing these moments as coincidence and start to see them as possible revelations. Small signs that something is happening beyond what is visible. And perhaps the most intriguing thing is that these experiences are not rare. Many people have reported similar sensations, as if they shared fragments of the same hidden truth, as if everyone were, in some way, perceiving the same pattern, but without being able to fully connect with it. And then an inevitable question arises: if these flaws are there, happening all the time, why do we almost never notice them? Comment below. I've felt that too. Good. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when we start thinking about the consequences of this mistake, everything stops being merely curious and begins to have a direct impact on how you live. It's no longer just about understanding reality. It's about realizing that it may be constantly being shaped by something that got out of control back then. If this mistake truly altered the foundation of everything, then every detail of your journey may carry small distortions. Not something that destroys reality, but something that constantly transforms it. As if the world were always adjusting to maintain an appearance of stability, while, behind the scenes, decisions are recalculated and paths are rearranged without you realizing it. This completely changes your mindset, because you stop seeing your life as a fixed sequence of events and begin to perceive a dynamic flow, where each choice can be a response to this system trying to balance itself. That decision that seemed random, maybe it wasn't. That unexpected encounter, maybe it was necessary to correct some invisible deviation. And what's most intriguing is that this brings a new layer of responsibility. Because if you're part of this adjustment process, then your actions carry more weight than they seem. Not only in your life, but possibly in the entire structure around you. As if each of your moves contributes, even minimally, to this continuous attempt to stabilize something that was born imperfect. This perspective may seem intense, but it also carries a kind of revelation, because it transforms the ordinary into something meaningful. Small moments take on value, coincidences gain meaning, and even mistakes can be part of something bigger. And then an inevitable question arises: is all this leading to a final correction, or is reality simply learning to live with this mistake? Comment below. Nothing is for the sake of it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we put all these pieces together, the initial error, the glitches of reality, the paradoxes of time, and this constant feeling of adjustment, a theory begins to emerge that not only connects everything but completely changes the way you perceive existence itself. What if reality isn't something fixed, but a system in constant attempt to correct itself? Think of it as a continuous, almost invisible process happening behind the scenes, as if, at every instant, the universe were recalculating possibilities, rearranging events, and adjusting decisions to maintain a stable version of itself. Not perfect, just functional. And that would explain why everything seems to make sense most of the time, but never absolutely. This theory brings about a profound transformation in your mindset because it breaks the idea that there is a single, definitive line. Instead, what exists may be a sequence of refined versions, each attempting to approach a coherence that is never fully achieved, as if reality were a draft being constantly edited. And perhaps that's why certain revelations appear in a fragmented way. Moments when you perceive something different feel a strange impact, as if you've accessed a piece of that hidden truth for a second, but soon after, everything returns to normal, or at least, to what seems normal. The most intriguing thing is that, within this logic, the error never completely disappears. It remains there, influencing, shaping, generating small imperfections that the system tries to smooth out. And this means that reality is not trying to erase the error, but to coexist with it. And then an even more unsettling idea emerges: what if this version of yourself that you're living now is just the most stable one so far? If that's the case, everything you know can change at any moment, not chaotically, but as part of this silent process of adjustment, a journey that never truly ends. It only evolves. Comment below. Reality is being adjusted, and now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because after all this, the reflection that remains is not only about the universe, but about you within it. If reality is this constantly adjusting system, then your perception may be the only thing that connects you to what is really happening behind the scenes. And here's where something powerful comes in. Your way of seeing the world can directly influence how you experience that reality. Not in the sense of absolute control, but as an active part of this mechanism. Your mindset, your decisions, the way you interpret the signs. All of this can shape how this version of reality presents itself to you. This brings about a silent, almost imperceptible, yet extremely profound transformation, because you stop being just someone who reacts to the world, and become someone who observes, questions, and perceives patterns. And the more you do this, the more details begin to emerge. Small revelations, moments that would have gone unnoticed before, but now carry a different impact. Perhaps the hidden truth never appears directly. Perhaps it's diluted in these fragments, in these sensations that don't make sense at first glance. And perhaps the biggest mistake isn't what created reality, but the fact that we rarely stop to realize that something might be out of place. If that's the case, then real change begins the moment you decide to pay attention. Because, in the end, the question isn't just whether reality is stable or not, but whether you're willing to see beyond what seems obvious. And from here, a new doubt begins to arise. Not about the world, but about how much of your own experience may have been adjusted without you realizing it. Comment below. I started to notice Eber, and if you've made it this far, perhaps that already says more than any explanation. Maybe some part of this idea made sense to you, even if in a way that's hard to explain. And that's exactly what makes this journey so interesting. It's not about having all the answers, but about starting to see things differently. If this kind of reflection captivates you, makes you think, takes you out of autopilot, then it's worth continuing to explore it together. Subscribing to the channel ends up being just a way to keep this connection active, to continue delving into these topics that aren't always obvious, but always leave some kind of mark. And if you really stayed until the end, comment here, "I'm with you until the end." It's a simple way to show that this message reached you, and also to connect with other people who are on the same wavelength. And of course, if at any point during this video you felt that click, that feeling of this is different, leaving a like is almost like recording that. It's like marking that moment when something made sense, even subtly. Now, there's a video over here that complements all of this in an even more in-depth way. Click on it and continue reading with me there.